Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. In today's episode, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and its Ukrainian proxy forces. Now, as we continue to watch what is happening within the confines of this conflict, as we continue to watch what certain leaders of various nation states are attempting to say and or articulate about the ongoing conflict, it is glaringly apparent that the West is concerned about continued Russian military success. Now look, mainstream media would state that the conflict, at least on the ground, is stagnant, and that much of the conflict is now taking place with the use of long-range cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, guided glide bombs, and kamikaze attack drones. Now, while that is true, that Russia is conducting a very large-scale air operation against both Ukrainian and NATO forces all over the Ukraine, there is also non-static operations that are continuing. If we look in areas such as Zaporizhia, we have seen the Russian army move north and continue to capture territory. We are continuing to see operations in Donetsk. We are continuing to see envelopment operations taking place near Pokrovsk. We have seen a breakthrough of Russian forces to the northeast of Pokrovsk. We are observing Russian forces start to envelop Ukrainian forces in Kupiansk. We are seeing Russian forces and its operations further to the south that are directed towards Pokrovsk, also directed towards a possible envelopment operation with Kramatorsk and Sloviansk in mind as well. So, again, static war claimed by Western media. That is not the case. It is a slow-moving, methodical conflict that the Russians are prosecuting that is designed to break the back of the Ukrainian military. Now look, we've talked about the makeup of the Ukrainian military over the course of the last several months. We've talked about the age of the Ukrainian military. At this point, no one in the West would argue that the Ukrainian state is committing age discrimination against elderly Ukrainian males. On the contrary, they are probably committing age discrimination against Ukrainians aged 18 to 25, because the majority of the fighters that are currently engaged along the front lines exceed the age of 40 years old. I don't think that there has been a conflict in human history that has seen a majority of old men being used at the front line. And it's a little bit disconcerting, I got to tell you. It's almost as if the Ukrainian state feels that those aged men, aged 40 to 60 years old, really have a non-contributing factor to society and thus are going to be used as cannon fodder. Is that happening? Probably. Probably. Very much so. So reverse age discrimination in the Ukrainian military. Very interesting to see that happen. But again, this very slow-moving, methodical military operation by the Russians, and in some cases, just recently, have proven to be not just slow-moving, but actual breakthrough operations in which the Russians gain large amounts of territory. And I've talked about this before, that at a certain point, you will see the Ukrainian military break. It will eventually collapse under pressure. I don't believe at this point that the Russian government has any desire for a political outcome to this conflict right now. If the conflict were to freeze, as I've talked about before, even if the Ukrainians capitulate Donetsk and Luhansk, I don't think the Russians have met its military goals. And I think right now the Russians are shaping the battlefield and preparing the country for a continued conflict that will eventually break the Ukrainian military. And that is going to progress. And then once that occurs, once you finally see the Ukrainian military break, you are going to know that is happening. And it could be in the early stages of happening now, and it could be the deep middle stages to that actually happening now, as we are seeing more rhetoric by the West in terms of possible direct participation in this conflict. We're starting to slowly see certain Western leaders talk about the idea or the concept of providing direct air support to the Ukrainian military. Well, why would they be doing that? Well, they're doing that because they believe that defeat for the Ukrainian military could be on the horizon. Now, keep in mind, if the Ukrainian military is eventually defeated, and I don't think it's a matter of if, I think it's a matter of when. I don't think Russia is going to allow a status quo. I don't think it is going to allow a NATO quasi-state to exist in what was the Ukraine. I just don't think Russia is going to allow that to happen. Thus, the war is going to continue. At the same time, Western European nation states, the United States, has injected large amounts of treasure and military assistance to the Ukrainians. If there is a military defeat by the Ukrainians, there are going to be questions. There's going to be accountability in terms of the United States, the West, injected all this military assistance into the Ukraine, and it was unable to prevent the Ukraine from falling or being militarily defeated. And that's kind of where we're at right now in terms of the decision-making processes that are being made by Western European and decision makers inside the United States at this point. But again, don't make any mistake. The Russians are going to continue this conflict until they have achieved a majority of their design political goals. So we will continue to cover the conflict. As always, thanks for joining us. More to come. Have a good day.